I'm thrilled to finally meet in person Issy Nancarrow, Director of Nancarrow Partnerships and Campaign Learning. Welcome, Issy, to Learning Now TV.
Thank you, Kim.
Great to be speaking with you.
Thank you for inviting me.
Very welcome. I'd love to know a little bit more about what you and your company does and any particular focuses that you have for 2018.
Well, I run a marketing organisation that was set up initially working with networks or people within the learning provider industry, and from there developed into supporting companies with developing their internal communications to really increase engagement within L&D and taking the marketing approach from that. Over the next year, actually there's specifically a much bigger push on that, because we've been doing some work around helping some multinationals develop their internal identity, develop comms around that, develop strategies for launching new software, which leads to quite an interesting 2018, I think.
Absolutely. I'd love to pick up on the identity piece you mentioned. What do you think that means, having a learning identity?
Because we're looking at how does people across all of the different departments in the organisation, all of the different levels, how do they, yes, perceive learning and development, and how do they actually, how does learning and development curate their own identity to help support the influence they have internally, both at the senior leadership level, right down to the grassroots level, and getting people involved, getting people to value what they do, to want to be involved within L&D. Which I know is an ongoing fight, as it were, and it's really looking at what identity means to that and how identity can help people to create that journey.
That's really important. What misconceptions do you think are out there?
One of the big ones I find is learning and development teams that have put work into their needs analysis, to understanding where the skills gap are, and trying to match that with business objectives and trying to become a constructive part of the company moving forward. But there's a big difference between trying to achieve that and actually being seen as a crucial part of the organisation, kind of part of the conduit of how do you get people involved in learning, fill those skills gaps, and help the company along that journey. There's a massive gap there, I find, from what's going on at the moment and what could be happening.
Absolutely. It's not enough to be focusing solely on the people and their skills gaps. You've got to take it to another level and have those really crucial conversations with senior leaders and then the business in general in order to progress the business and to achieve more success.
And if your identity doesn't match that role, then internally L&D won't be perceived to be providing that role, irrelevant of how well they've planned for it or how effective they could potentially be at it.
So how are you going about supporting organisations with this?
Well, it's very much starting on the bespoke level. So we're talking to these teams about where they are at the moment and what they're trying to achieve. And I think really crucially it comes at a stage when they're trying to make a big change. So usually it comes along side changing the way that they deliver L&D, or really realising that they need to change the way they perceive their identity within L&D, whether or not they realise that that is part of the key problem. So I start by looking at who their main influences are and who the other influences are within the organisation, and really mapping out, who are the influences that you can utilise and how are they perceived, therefore how do you need to be perceived to be part of essentially that core stream of business operation. Because far more often than not, L&D is not perceived to be within that core stream. And if you're not in that core stream, you cannot get the engagement from staff and you cannot get the buy-in from leaders. You're really starting at a losing battle. So we look at that and we look at how within the dynamics of their organisation they can become that. From my perspective, that then leads on through the communications. Really, from a marketing perspective, looking at the overall branding. So who do you mean as a team? How do you need to be perceived? How does that come across in the way that you communicate person to person, as well as in your mass communications, how you deliver your interventions, how you communicate on a regular basis, at all levels of the organisation.
There's a lot about relationship building, a lot about positioning.
Yes.
And then the communications piece is crucial. So touching on that, I'd love to hear some practical advice around how a learning and development team could better market themselves.
Yes, well, some pitfalls, regular pitfalls, if that would help, include mass communications sent to everybody rather than targeted, that have long streams of information that are essentially trying to convince people that they are worthy. And it's almost like you're starting off on the wrong foot. So you're coming from the perspective of, I really need to engage people, rather than from the perspective of what will engage people and how do I grab them? How do I make them engaged, make them interested, and make them understand that this is valuable? So, for instance, if you're a clothes shop, you're not going to plead to people to come to you. You're going to say, "Look at this! This is fantastic. You need this," and that's where it comes from. And you're far more likely to get buy-in.
Wonderful. So, what's next for you? Where do you see this evolving? Or do you have any success stories that you'd like to share?
Okay, so success stories I would like to share would be around the compliance sector, particularly in finance, where you're looking at bringing in a learning intervention. Now, what I found in this case was very much, when you're looking at the perception of L&D, you're looking at the bigger piece, but when you're trying to bring in a specific change, there's another piece around how do we engage people within that piece, and the campaign approach around that. So this is where the concept of campaign learning comes in. So it's all about campaign and how do you utilise the concept of a campaign to get engagement. And this piece was around getting people to change their behaviours in line with legislation and embedding that through a range of media and being able to track the change in behaviours over a period of time. And actually showing, having proof in this instance at the end of it, the impact that had, which the company could then use to say, we know we are this compliant, we know this is where our weak areas are. And it gave the L&D team a huge amount of gravitas to be able to say, this is actually a risk area. You need to be giving us more power to be able to go over here and go in here and make sure this changes. But this is also our success story. So that they had
perfect, the data and the maybe more anecdotal evidence as well, to back it up.
Absolutely, and that's really a piece that we're actually redoing again with another organisation this year, which I'm excited about.
Wonderful. Well, that's absolutely fascinating. I think just to kind of summarise some key points, it's relationship building, as I mentioned earlier, the influence that a team can to gain with the right groups of people throughout an organisation, trying to be more involved with conversations, so almost being quite bullish about it. And
from a personal perspective, it's don't be afraid of who you are. Know that you are valuable and be valuable. From a identity perspective, it's not just about the individuals involved. It's about the bigger picture of the department.
Excellent.
And projecting that.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much, Issy. It's really been great to speak with you. So valuable. Thank you.